Welcome, everybody. It's great to have all of you with us on another Crowdcast broadcast here at Coda. So I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces over there in chat, which is great. But if any of you don't know who I am, my name's Maria Marquis, and here at Coda, I love celebrating our makers, celebrating our users, and all the great things people are doing with Coda. And in general, I consider myself the chief cheerleading officer. So it's my job to make sure that everybody, that's my promotion, right, Shishir? That's on
Yeah, it
paper
sounds
now?
great. Yeah.
If I broadcasted it, so it must be true.
Yeah.
But I really love just celebrating all of the great work and empowering people to build on top of Coda to surprise us, because that's really one of the true delights of my job. And I'm also joined by someone you might have heard of, Shishir. Shishir, do you want to introduce yourself to the group for folks who may not know who you are yet?
Sure. I'm Shishir Mehrotra. I'm one of the founders of Coda. Um, Helped start the company about 6 years ago, and excited to talk a bit about what we're up to now and what we've been up to and what we're going to be doing in the future.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen in just a moment. But before I do, I just want to make sure everybody understands the logistics of how today is going to work. So there's a chat field over there on the right. Clifford and Rue have already found it, which is fantastic. You can use that at any point in time today. We certainly encourage you to do so. There's also a little ask a question button right below Shishir and my faces. And that's a place to log any questions that you have so that it doesn't get lost over there in chat. We'll also be sharing some docs with all of you today so you can get involved with us. So just know that there's no such thing as an interruption in these virtual sessions. Just use those two options, and that's going to be a way to get in touch with us at any point in time. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. You should see it in just a moment. Shishir, if you could just let me know when that's coming through, just so I know that we're all set there from that perspective.
I can see it now.
Oh, nice. Fabulous. We are here in the present. So how today is going to work through the magic of Coda pages over here on the side, we're going to start off with just why we're excited about the investors that have put their belief inside of our company, and really some of the sort of who's who of that. We're also going to talk about kind of looking back at 2020, all the launches that have happened, some of the things we're excited about, and what we want to hear from you about what you have seen to be the most beneficial parts. And then we're going to share kind of our focus for the rest of the year, and also take any and all questions that you might have. So Shishir, I'm going to kick it over to you. I've got some of these fabulous logos here of our investors, but I'd just love to hear from you, like why you're so excited about the people who are joining our mission.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to start with the news, we just announced our Series C financing last week. So third round of major money coming into Coda, which I'm excited about for a number of reasons. I mean, I think it's as people that follow the startup ecosystem, it's a good validation. It's a good confirmation that we're on the right track. And of course, practically speaking, it allows us to invest in the future and really continue to make Coda even better for all of us. The investor group we pull together, I think, is sort of a dream team for me. The round is led by Mamoon Hamid. Mamoon is he runs a firm called Kleiner Perkins, which is a fairly historic venture capital firm. And Mamoon is one of my favorite investors. I consider him to be one of the best B2B SaaS investors out there. Anytime he's invested in something, I've tended to try as hard as I could to follow. He led the early rounds in Slack and Figma and Box and Yammer, Intercom, Greenhouse, just a long list of companies. And he got really excited about what we're up to. He's going to be joining the board as well. Beyond that, we have a few others great investors. Soma from Madrona. Soma ran the developer division at Madrona, and the Madrona as a firm is also super interesting. It's sort of the preeminent firm in Seattle. That invested in a number of different places, including Smartsheet. And I think the 1 second, I'm sorry about that. I just have to turn off whatever is ringing here.
It's someone calling like, "Hey, Shishir, tell me more about this Series C."
Yes, exactly. Should have turned that off earlier. Yeah, so each of the others I think is interesting. Madrona got pulled into Coda because they started running their firm on Coda. Actually, similar to the next one, Underscore. And in both cases, I think they were, um, because of how they were using Coda, they ended up being very interested in the round. Have been talking to me about it for a while. Underscore is a firm out in Boston. Michael Scott is the main investor there. They run a really unique process. One of the fun things they told us in the fundraising process, so uh, they've made your Coda knowledge a requirement for joining the firm, and so that
Cool.
as associates join, they have to show off how they use Coda. Some of the others on the list, Renegade Partners, is Roseanne Winsack. Roseanne was an investor at IVP for a number of years, and we've gotten to know each other for a long time. And one of the exciting parts of that is we are actually the first investment for that fund. It's a brand new fund.
Cool. Oh, I didn't
Um,
know that. That's awesome.
NGP Capital, that's Rohini Chakravarti. They actually published a doc about it that's sort of similar to Madrona and Underscore. They came to us first as customers, and they've built an AI system on Coda. They call it
Neat.
Q, and that helps them take all the data about all the companies they're looking at and decide where they're going to invest. And then finally, Hawk Equity, great firm out in New York. Led rounds in Uber and Open Door and so on. I think David published a great doc on brainstorming ideas for what post COVID-19 will look like, which I think is a really good example.
Oh, that's a great doc. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are some of the major firms. We also added a number of angels. A lot of people you may have heard of. Ev Williams, the CEO of Medium. Tamar Yehoshua is the CPO of Slack. Alyssa Henry's the CTO of Square. Mark Pincus is the founder of Zynga. We had a lot of fun talking about game mechanics in Coda.
Cool.
Claire Hughes Johnson, Rahul Vora. There's also some fun ones that are maybe familiar from other areas. Jed York is the CEO of the 49ers. Andy Duke is a professional poker player. Jeffrey Katzenberg started DreamWorks, started Quibi. And I think one of the reasons I'm so excited about this whole class of investors is they sort of represent the breadth of how Coda gets used, and in so many different use cases, in so many different areas. And I was just really excited to get everybody aligned and pulled into the Coda ecosystem.
Yeah,
That's
I love that.
yeah.
Awesome. And also just a reminder, folks, if you've got questions, ideas, comments, you can always use that chat field or the ask a question button. No problem. You don't have to wait for me and Shishir to stop talking, because I can guarantee you Shishir and I could talk for probably 5 hours straight. Shishir, I think we could probably do that. I have faith in us there.
For sure.
So also, if any of you want to read more about the funding round and learn a little bit more about all these great people who are now part of our mission, I've just included the link to the blog doc with this fantastic video of Shishir's great kitchen in the background that folks can do to read more about what all of this entails.
I just realized I'm wearing a very similar shirt.
Hey, you got to have a brand, right?
This is COVID-19 gear. Is you stop wearing clothing.
Like, everything is this sweater. I love it. So we thought it'd be really fun before we take a look into the future. It's always interesting to sort of look into the past and reflect back. So back on January 21st of 2020, which feels like years ago now, Shishir and I sat down for what are we really excited about for 2020? For our Year of the Maker is what we were calling it. And one of the things that we had folks do is post in the different features that they were really hoping for, kind of a wish list, and also the ability to upvote and downvote kind of what you also agree with. And we found a lot of really interesting things. And I'm actually just going to snag a link to this just so we can do it. If anybody wants to keep on popping things in there, please feel free. So Shishir, if you're thinking about, back January 21st, 2020, and this particular experience, kind of what has changed for you and what has stayed the same, looking at the kind of the mission and the vision of our company?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're executing super fast. I think I'm really excited about we seem to have found a very good loop of working with our community, hearing different ideas, being able to produce some things that are directly responses to things the feedback we hear, and occasionally surprising people a little bit with things that they might not have expected. the team draws a lot of energy from watching makers, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, Maria. Like being surprised is a key part of being at Coda.
Hmm.
So you know every day there's some example somebody did that surprises us and
Hmm.
um, stretches our imagination of what we can do in Coda. In terms of how the product and the offering are improving, one of the other things I love about Coda is this list is awfully close to the list that we are actually working on,
Hmm.
and that, I don't think that's to be taken for granted.
Right.
I think many of you know that I used to run the YouTube division for Google, and that was a place with also an active community, but where the community's requests and what we're working on didn't always line up. You see a lot of tension in that community.
Mm.
This feels like almost the opposite. Like it's usually what makers
Yeah.
want us to do in Coda is pretty close to what we're actually working on, and many of these things
Hmm.
we've done and shipped, and page within page and so on are all
Hmm.
things that are now available to users, and many of
Yeah.
the others are things we are actively working on now. So I
Hmm.
love the alignment. Please keep adding to that list.
Yeah.
Vote up and down things that you want to see. We look at it fairly closely.
Yeah. One thing I just want to reiterate about what Shishir said is one of the things that I think is really different about Coda is that our product and engineering teams like love this kind of information. Like our product managers want to go out and hear from you. Like, what's going on? What do you love? What's a problem? Tell me exactly how this would work. There's so much curiosity and like altruistic motivation from hearing from the feedback of our community inside of our product and engineering organization, which is something that you don't see everywhere and something I'm always consistently impressed by with my colleagues. So the next thing that we wanted to do is, I know Shishir, you were saying you want to be able to share the love and share some kudos internally. So we would actually love to know from you what your favorite launch or favorite doc of 2020 was. So I'm just going to go ahead, snag this link. So that'll allow you to come on into our presentation right over here. And what you can do is you can just click on this handy little add your favorite button, and it'll add it to our voting table. And it'll end up looking pretty similar to what we saw over in this Year of the Baker area. But we want to know what was something that made a difference for you in 2020. And maybe it could have been a doc, maybe it was a feature, but we really want to be able to share with our product and engineering team the things that are really generating excitement. Shashir, anything else on this particular activity that you want to share with the group as far as kind of why we wanted to do this today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be great to get the kudos, and we hear about it. We hear about it in the community forums and so on, but
Mhm.
it's always nice to hear sort of directly what people found exciting.
Mhm.
So yeah, would love to hear people's favorites.
Yeah, nice. Looks like we got some votes coming in. Again, you can just click on add your favorite. Also, I would be remiss in my duties if I did not also plug that this is, in fact, a drag and drop template that you can use in any doc that you've got going. You can just type slash in your doc and choose topic voting. And that's going to allow you to pull this template in and you can just adjust it however you like. And you can also get it by going over to your explore menu over on the side. But this is a pattern that you can reuse over and over again. So we'll give you a little bit of time here to just add what your favorite launch was, mostly because we're super curious. And it's always nice to know what are the things that are really making a difference and what are the threads that we should continue to follow with all of you. Shashir, while we're waiting for folks to populate their answers, what was your favorite launch of the year so far? I know,
Oh
hard
boy,
question.
yeah, this is like picking your favorite kids. The let's see. I'll have a hard time narrowing to one, but I'll try a
Mhm.
couple. Um, let's see, things we did that I thought were really awesome. Um, Probably one of the most fundamental was publishing. So the
Mm,
ability to publish a doc and basically get a website out of it. And then the second launch that came after that was the gallery. So we relaunched the doc gallery, and I don't know if people caught it, but it went from template gallery to doc gallery, which is actually a
yeah.
very meaningful change
Mhm.
from our perspective. Um, and that I just think it like opened up creativity in a totally different way. Before that, to publish a template, you had to look at that. I think the first vote was for the
There
same
we
thing.
go. I
So
upvoted it.
so I think it just opened up people's creativity in a totally different way, and so I was
Mhm.
really excited about that. I think So that's maybe one example. The other one that it may seem like a small feature, but has been really impactful is collapsible sections.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think if people haven't seen it, it's the ability to toggle. I guess in the next section you have some set up that way,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you can take any header or bullet or so on and make it a collapsible list.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those really simple things that brought the document to life for people and made
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of easy cases possible.
Yeah.
Taking notes in a meeting became date notes. All of a sudden you can collapse them together or collapse together agenda topics or so on. I think that all of those things were really awesome. Yeah, Maria's showing off how to do it. By the way, Maria, our faces are on top of where you're typing right now. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
interesting.
I'm not sure if we're movable or if the page is movable. Or
Let's
maybe
see.
I
I
can do
can
it on
move
my
that up.
side.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So this feature, the little triangles there. It's something like 30% of our docs now have a collapsible region, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is, I mean, for a feature that's only 5 months old, it's just, I think,
Yep.
incredible. I don't think we've seen faster adoption of anything we've
Mm-hmm.
launched. So yeah, those are two that come to mind.
Yeah. I'm with you, Shishir. I think my favorites, and I put mine in the list here, is just the little text improvements that we've done, from the collapsible headings, but also having the new collapsible list bullet type, which I love. I used to use workflowy way back in the day, and this gives me a little bit of that feeling. And then just simple things like adjusting for serif versus not serif, having outlines. I just feel like the text has really come alive in a way that wasn't necessarily the case before 2020. So that is my personal favorite as well. Ooh,
Yeah.
slash shortcuts. I love that one too. Yes, I got to upvote that one now as well. Mm-hmm. Um, and Shashir, how about your favorite doc? What was your favorite doc so far of 2020?
Oh boy, this is even harder.
I
So,
know, I know. I'm asking all the
um,
hard hitting questions.
I'm gonna try to ignore my own. If people want to go look at, I was actually really, it was one of my New Year's resolution that was to publish at least one piece a month, and I think I've mostly
Mm,
kept a pace with that,
nice.
which I think is great. And so there are some really fun ones there. And if you go to Coda.io/Shishir, you'll find a bunch of them.
Mhm.
Um, Things that were published by the community. One I'm really excited about is called Schoolhouse.world, which I think is
Yeah.
that Sal Khan and a team of volunteers has built a way to connect students and volunteer tutors. And they have thousands of students using it basically as an application. And they come in, you say what class you're interested in, tutor gets matched to that group, and you
Mhm.
show up, you do a live session in Zoom. Behind the scenes, that was a bunch of a bunch of volunteers doing it, which I always find like really inspiring. This,
Totally.
you, moments of crisis for the world often bring out the best in people. They bring out the worst sometimes too, but often bring out the best. So I think that's really exciting. And then from an infrastructure perspective, we did a bunch of things to. It uses a bunch of things that we've done recently. It uses the Zoom pack,
Mhm.
which allows them to schedule Zoom meetings and collect the recordings
Yeah.
and try to ensure student safety. And so there's a bunch of really interesting things that got pulled into that. I think that was probably my favorite example.
Yeah. I would
Yeah.
say my favorite docs, I'm going to say docs because to your point about kind of crises bringing out the best in people, in much of our economy, there have been a lot of layoffs happening that, of course, companies don't want to do. And of course, the people being laid off wouldn't want to have happen either. But a bunch of people created alumni lists on Coda showing, hey, these are all of my great former colleagues. You should hire them. They're wonderful. They're suffering from the layoff situation, but here's where it goes. And it ended up just being this really altruistic, helpful thing. And if I think about Coda docs that mean the most to me, it's those Coda docs that solve a specific problem. And I love when people use their creativity and ingenuity to solve a problem with something as simple as a doc that references folks to each other, which is pretty exciting.
Yes. Agreed.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we've got a few people. Feel free to keep on adding your favorite launches and everything here. More than happy to do it. But I think it'd be really great this year if we kind of shift for, now that we've been looking back around some of the things that have happened and, what we're really excited about with the folks who are joining our mission. But now getting to probably what folks are really interested in, which is what does this mean for the rest of the year and then looking into 2021? So do you want to talk through kind of these three different parts of how
Yeah.
you've clarified the mission for the company for the rest of the year?
Yeah, and it's probably worth starting by saying we move really fast, so it's very hard. It's very hard to actually predict a roadmap, and so
Yes.
think about these as thematic nudges of encouragement, but not necessarily that we will do this before that. And we tend to react quickly. Sometimes the way we do it works, sometimes it doesn't. We go back to the drawing board. But these are some of the big areas. I mean, fundamentals, I think, is one of the biggest, and the team was quite excited to return to some of these. I think
Yeah.
it's a interesting problem of scale that you have to come back to some of the very basic things. And lots of different types of fundamentals we're looking at. The ones that generally rise to the top of the list for us are performance and scalability. We've seen people do things in Coda that are well beyond what we expected, and so it seems like every 18 months or so we come back, do a round of improvements on performance and
Yeah.
scalability. The doc performs for 10x bigger scenarios, and then makers' aspirations exceed that again. And so
Yes.
I doubt this is ever going to be done. I used to work on a product at Microsoft called SQL Server, the database product, and there's sort of no end to where these things can head if you get to performance scalability. So I think that's one big category. The other one I think is on the IT side is we're now being used by over 25,000 teams around the world, and so the types of things that the IT departments ask us for are now beyond what just the first initial maker looks for. And
Right.
so there's a long list of things there. We're working through our SOC 2 certification now. All the different tools that admins need as a
Yep.
sort of new audience for Coda, which I think is important as well. And I think when we do it well, I think of that as an audience that also embraces Coda not as the thing their team makes them pay for, but also a thing that is, a best-in-class way to run a product. And
Yeah.
we try to do a lot of things to make that work well. So one big bucket, fundamentals, and
Love
just
it.
get all those basics working.
Next
Number
bucket.
two, yeah. So make simple things easy. I think that if you look at what people are doing in Coda, there's clearly a very wide range, and there's a lot of really complex, docs truly as powerful as apps that people are doing. But actually, most of our users do incredibly simple things in Coda. They write their notes, they write their project briefs, they set up their wikis, it becomes their to-do list, like all these very simple things. And that's really, I think, important because it's how they learn. It's a new surface.
Yeah.
It's a change in behavior, and so sort of doing well, performing well on those simple tasks, you earn confidence to be able to work on some of the bigger ones as well. And so we've put a lot of effort already this year into those things, and some of them are the ones we mentioned, like collapsible sections. This is a good example of a thing the team came up with as a boy. Wouldn't it be nice if before I build anything else in the document itself just responded better? We built nested pages in this way. That was a very common ask. Things like all the different text features we're working on. There's a long list of things coming that I think we're excited about. Some of them are on the list that we looked at. Being able to lay out content side by side, being able to do more inside of cells. There's a lot of things there on really the simplest cases of Coda.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see more and more from us there.
And one thing I'll say is I really love how excited our engineering team is about tackling simple things. Like there's an almost obsessive focus on it. Like, oh, how can we make this most delightful, most beautiful? Which is interesting because you're not just seeing like, oh, I want to work on the next new big thing. You're seeing people who are like, how can we craft this in a way that's going to be ideal for usage and also look great? Which is it's a really interesting approach.
Right.
All right,
Definitely.
bucket number 3.
So bucket number 3, I think that it's one of my favorite parts of Coda is this first line here is that Coda feels more than just a product. It feels like this community,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
we'll often hear from people that I'm excited to be part of Coda, not just because it's a blinking cursor blank screen where I can do anything I want. It's I'm now part of this group that works
mhm.
together to sort of lift each other up
Totally.
that way. So that's really where the doc gallery and publishing came from. Was this idea that, hey, if you could publish a doc like a website to the world, and we could
Mhm.
provide a way to find each other's. That's what
Yeah.
we're doing with the doc gallery. That we might see this sort of virtuous cycle of people sharing information in much
Mhm.
the ways that platforms like YouTube or GitHub or Medium or so on. I think have also built really good ecosystems that way.
Mhm.
Um, I think that, and there's a lot. We have a long list of things we're doing there, and if you have
Yeah.
ideas, please tell us. Um,
Mhm.
lots of things we know we can do to improve that experience. The other one I'm excited about is this other audience, which is we've put attention on, but I think there's a lot more we can be doing is developers, and
Yeah.
we published an API very early. We just redid
That's
it. It's
right.
now the V1 of the API is now out. You come back to me later on why naming of APIs and what's beta and what's V1. I don't know, but probably
That's
the
a
the
TED
one.
talk we're ready for.
I mean, I think the one that I don't want to say too much about it yet because we're still defining exactly how it'll work. But
Mm.
probably the one that I'm most excited about there is opening up packs and
Yeah.
making it possible for more and more people to be able to contribute to the PAX ecosystem. And so
Mhm.
there'll be more there, but I think that this sort of rounds out the third big bucket. Invest in the fundamentals, make sure the core of the product's working well,
Mhm.
really tackle those simple things, and then allow the ecosystem around us to help reshape Coda for everyone else. So
Yeah.
those are our three big areas.
I love it. Awesome. Well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'd love for now, folks, this is your time. You can ask Shishir and myself anything Coda related, what you might be curious about. I know this knowing laughter from Shishir, like, Maria, what are you doing? We'd love to be able to answer any questions that are on your mind, things that you're thinking about, or just hear from you, like what you're most excited about, or even kind of what's on your wish list. Like, what do you want to be able to do with Coda? So please feel free to post those questions either to chat or the ask a question button. Either one works for us.
Uh-huh.
Shashir, I also think it's helpful to kind of hear from you. We sat down together 2020,
Mhm.
January.
Yeah.
And do you want to talk through kind of how you've thought about flexing and responding to our sort of changing world and kind of how that might have impacted how we think about the product and also how we think about running our company? Want to talk to some of your reflections and
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
flexibility?
Oh, yeah. What an interesting topic. I think you, obviously, world's going through a
Mhm.
terrible crisis. I mean, I don't think uh, it's sort of unthinkable. I don't think any of us, if you had asked in January when we did our first webinar of things to expect for this year, I mean, it wasn't anywhere on anyone's list.
Yeah.
So obviously, big adjustment. I think the so I'll answer at a couple levels. I mean, for
Yeah.
the Coda team, I think there was a silver lining to it. I mean, we've been a distributed company basically since the start. It's a philosophy that
Mhm.
Alex and I thought was important to imbue in the company as early as possible. And so I think second hire we made was in Seattle, and that sort of set the
Mhm.
tone of you can kind of work from anywhere and
Yeah.
and contribute to Coda. And this nobody would call what we're doing here normal distributed teams. And this is a big difference between
Mhm.
you sometimes don't see your coworkers and you are not allowed within 6 feet of your coworkers. That's not
Yeah.
the same thing. But
Uh-huh.
the I think it kind of forced us to stress some of our methods and processes and see which ones could keep up with that. And I think that's been quite good. I think I published in a list of docs to look at. I'll put it in the
Oh,
chat as
nice.
well.
Yeah.
The I published a guide to how we
Mhm.
run distributed teams that just goes through a few of the different techniques that we run through um, in terms of how we run meetings, how we think about communication, and so on. And some of the things scaled well, and some of them we were still working through how to get them to scale up. So yeah, I think that has mostly been I think a highlight. I mean, I think one of the things
Yeah.
that Doc talks about is I think that if you design a good distributed team, it probably makes you a better team overall. And I think
Mhm.
that's mostly been true for us. It can
Yeah.
be either devastating or it can be a thing that really is liberating. And I think that's what it's done for us. For our community, I think I've seen a similar dynamic. And obviously there's some people in our community that went through a lot of hardship in this process.
Mhm.
And by the way, if anybody has those types of concerns, please reach out to us. I think we've been doing what we can to help out, whether that's
Mhm.
simple things like on the cost side, or perhaps even in how you think about community or hiring, or Maria
Mhm.
mentioned a good example of building up alumni lists for companies.
Mhm.
Um, but on the flip side, there's also a set of teams that use this as an opportunity to really lean into those behaviors
Yeah.
and rethink some of the processes. And that way, we used to all get together and do this in person. We can't do that anymore. While we
Mhm.
redo it, maybe we can redo it in a way that solves other problems for us too. And
Yeah.
so I think we've seen some really good examples of that. So yeah,
Mhm.
I'm uh, it's hard to be. I see silver linings in everything. Maria knows that.
Yep.
Um, but even in a really terrible tragedy, I think that those silver linings are quite helpful.
Mhm. Awesome. And there's actually a really good question here from David, which is kind of related, which is, can you comment on your overall hiring goals and plans with new funding? And are you planning to keep a mostly SF-based company or expand to more remote workers?
Yeah, good question. And in terms of hiring plans, we're hiring quickly.
Mhm.
My guess is we'll probably roughly double the team in the next year, which will be fast. And I think the team is sort of geared up for it. I think that yeah, there's a link there for jobs. So if
Mhm.
you're interested, basically across all functions. So if you
Yep.
uh, if you like to think about the future of work as much as we do, please reach out and we'll
Mhm.
see what we can find that's a good fit. In terms of locations, I mean, interesting in the question, we're kind of an SF based company. I mean, I live actually not
Ish.
in SF. I live in Los Altos, which is
Mhm.
40 miles south.
Mhm.
The and But we already have people spread all over the
Mhm.
country and world. And one of the most interesting, sort of back to the last question as well,
Yeah.
one of my interesting observations, I think about 10% of Coda employees have moved their physical home in the middle of the pandemic,
Mhm.
moving all over the place. And I think that's one of the really positive benefits
Mhm.
of this crisis, is that people realized, hey, I can actually work this way. Maybe it's a good opportunity to be closer to family or closer to where they grow up, or
Mhm.
whatever reason they might want to be.
Yeah.
My co-founder Alex actually moved to Idaho. He's Idaho. He's living on a 160-acre
Yes.
ranch, which to me sounds like an incredible pain in the butt, but to him is amazing. It's a thing
Yeah.
they've dreamed of for a long time, and this offered a good opportunity for it.
Mhm.
So to answer your question directly, I think we'll take people anywhere. I don't think there's
Mhm.
a I think offices, and this is not just true for Coda, I think it's going to be true for most companies. Offices are quickly going to become an important optional construct of a company. And is there an office nearby that I can go into if I want, will be very important.
Yep.
But the way the team is organized, we don't really care. I was just on a every we do our new hire orientation every couple of weeks, and I just went through it with our newest batch of employees, and it was just amazing to hear where everybody lives,
Yeah.
and interesting, like, doesn't seem to matter,
Mhm.
which I think is a good thing.
Yeah. And I will say, I think the interesting thing about how our remote landscape has shifted is we have a lot of people who it's not just, oh, I'm in the Seattle office or I'm in the San Francisco office, but it's like, I'm just in my own place by myself. We have lots of people who are just
Yeah,
solo in their home. And because of the rigor that we've put into how we manage our time and manage our notes, like it ends up working out really well. I honestly feel like I don't notice it very often, which
right.
is kind of interesting to me. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Um,
just ran our first or second, sorry, hackathon, and hackathons are
mhm.
actually interesting for us because they're very important to our culture. We run them 3 or 4 times a year. I would say most of the good ideas in the product have come out of hackathons, which is kind of an extreme statement, but I think
Yeah.
that I think that is roughly true.
Mhm.
The And I think the this is the second time running it all remote. We traditionally, that was the one time of the year that we would bring
Right.
everybody together, and so
Mhm.
that was interesting, and that was one of the hardest ones to transition. But I think it went
Mhm.
pretty well, so I'm excited
Yeah.
about it. So.
Well, and we were also talking about before all y'all joined us when Shishir and I were just, hanging out, that there's been a really interesting leveling of the playing field with everybody being remote in a hackathon situation. Like, there's no one person who has to be like, I'm dialing in. Can somebody, what did you say? Since we're
Yeah.
all remote, it kind of allowed us to, of course, it comes with its challenges, but it brings some really interesting opportunities too. So Shishir, since we're waiting for some more questions to come in, all y'all please let us know what's on your mind. Anything Coda related is, of course, fair game. But I would love to know from you, like, what is a doc that hasn't been built yet that you would love to see built? Like, what's on your list?
Oh, boy, hasn't been built yet. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure people have built all sorts of docs that,
For
that
sure,
I
that
don't,
you're not aware of. And if
yeah,
folks
that I'm
have
not
built
aware of.
it, send us
Yeah,
the link.
maybe I'll tell a story of one that maybe will give a sort of feeling for this. The schoolhouse one was a really good example as well.
Yeah.
But I get asked fairly often. We make the statement, you can make a doc as powerful as an app, and people will test that and say, you don't really mean as powerful as an app, right? You don't really mean that
Mhm.
you could rebuild X, and they'll throw out whatever X is,
Yeah.
and we'll have a discussion about it. One of my favorite examples was somebody asked me, do you think you could rebuild Uber in Coda? And I said, I think I told the story about this group in Idaho where they had written in and they were telling us about what they were using Coda for, and what they had done was the place where they live is pretty spread out, and so the kids have to travel, sometimes 25, 30 miles
Right.
to school, and so they had set up a big carpool network, and it was like 25 families and this big rotational carpool. It was a big deal. And it was really hard to coordinate. And so they built this whole
Yeah.
thing in Coda to coordinate this. And the parents would list which students needed rides, and then some of them would offer, here's I can pick up on this day, not that day. Here's
Mhm.
what my car is like. I have car seats or I don't. I have
Yeah.
like all,
Yeah.
all the different dynamics, right? And then it would match make. And a couple interesting things about this. This maker was telling me the story about this document, and he said, one interesting observation of this document is, it represents an enormous time saving, right? It's like every
Mhm.
single time you have a car with three other kids in it, you have just saved three parents at least an hour out of their day, which is like
Mhm.
an enormous give back to a community. So it's very impactful. And he actually
Yeah.
had in the document time saved by the community as one of the stats.
Love
The
it.
other one was,
Yes.
if this thing doesn't work, it's a big problem, right? Because if it doesn't work, you have some kid standing on the curb, bawling, and not ready to be picked up, right? And so like the pressure on this is really high. But if you step all the way back and look at that example, it's not quite building Uber in Coda. But what it is I often just joke that Uber is Uber's a great product, and does lots of good for the world and so on, but we take rides from strangers because we can't figure out how to coordinate with friends. And so the interesting example here was, like, was that rebuilding Uber? Well, kind of. And so I think we're going to see many examples like that, where the things that people build in Coda will often be inspired by and relevant to some of the classic
Yeah.
things we've looked at. But when you apply them to your specific team or your specific community, you often get something that is kind of scripted a slightly different way. And so that
Mhm.
was one example of something that's kind of been built in Coda, and I expect
Yeah.
we'll see much more.
I love that. And again, it's that a doc that uniquely solves a problem for a unique set of people. I just love that. We've got a good question here from David, which is the new collapsible list functionality and similar parent-child relationships can be really powerful for laying out information inside of Coda. Are there any plans to expand the Canvas capability even further into kind of free-form rows or mind mapping of rows? Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of how we're thinking about the text portion of Coda?
Yeah, I mean, feedback welcome on this. I mean,
Yes.
I think the effort we're working on now is how to take a lot of the text capabilities and bring them into rows.
Mhm.
There's a couple different implementations we're working on. We've been testing them out, seeing exactly what they feel like. But it's clear that a lot of the things you can now do in a canvas, what we call canvas or the page, is things
Mhm.
that people regularly ask for inside of rows. And I want to be able to do collapsible lists, or I want to be able to lay out images, or so on, or even just the basics of I want to be able to have collaborative editing in those
Mhm.
places. And so that's something we are working on. There's a few different designs for how to do it.
Mhm.
Mind mapping I view a little bit differently. I think my view of where that'll come from is probably closer to table layouts, the way we do
Mhm.
charts and Gantt charts and calendars and
Mhm.
so on. I think there's some pretty creative ways to build those, and we've built prototypes before, so I expect we'll see something there as well. But yeah, I'm excited about both ideas. I think about them in slightly different areas, but feel free to tell me if you
Yeah.
think you would look at it differently.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like a coda problem to solve is, how do we figure out how we don't just want to launch a feature, we want to figure out like how does this thing interact with all of the other things and how can we make it plug and playable with as many parts of the product as possible, right? Like it's not just let's launch Crosstalk, but it's let's actually figure out how Crosstalk plays well with syncing tables and packs, and also how does that serve our publishing. So it's always interesting to find like what is the right most optimal implementation of something like this, which is
Right.
neat, like seeing the different perspectives, like, ooh, is it row first, is it page first, where does it go? So definitely stay tuned, y'all. And great question, David, love that.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Pravat, which is what was the first document that you wrote using Coda, Shishir? Do you remember 6 years ago?
Um, The first one I wrote, there's, I mean, we have screenshots of some of the early ones, and
So good.
the first one, I'm trying to remember what the first one I wrote, but the first one that got written was Alex did it, and it was a list of his family members, um, and it was very cute because it had at the time he only had, I think he has three daughters now, but I think only one of them was born
Yes.
at the time,
Hmm.
and so he had a list of himself and Carly and Avery, and then he had the dog Baker, and then the demo was he had a column for their birthdays and a column for age, and the age column was if it's a person then it's age, and otherwise it's 7 times age. And I'm actually not a dog person, so it wasn't really obvious to me that that's how you do dog years. But this document got used over and over and over again, and we used it as examples, and that's how I learned how to think about the age of dogs. So
I
that was the first one.
the more you know, Shashir. Um, Also, one thing I will say on this note, one thing I always love to do is revisit docs that I've built 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago that maybe I don't use anymore because the project has
Yeah,
passed, and just to see how much of the product has changed in that time.
yeah,
I actually wrote a blog post about that at the beginning of this year because there's so
yes,
many, we move so quickly that you can kind of get a little bit of whiplash there. Great
yeah,
question. Also, a little
yeah.
bit of Coda history. I love that.
Yes.
We've got a good question here from Rue, which is what about a French version for small and medium sized companies? Would love to help them discover and use Coda. So I know localization is something that we are thinking about because we are
Yeah.
blessed to have a global set of users,
Yeah.
which is so exciting. I want to say, Shashir, and hold me to this. More than half of our users are not in the United States, like
Yeah.
by
I
a
think it's
fair
sixty
amount,
percent.
correct?
Yeah. I think it's 60 or seventy
Yeah.
percent. Yeah. Yeah.
So localization is something that we are definitely interested in. I would say right now we have like localization light, where we support international keyboards, we support the ability to change out different symbols and things like that. But like full localization, it's probably not quite there yet. But I would say you can get quite far starting off. And if you ever need support figuring out how to reach out to people, let us know. And I would say, Shashir, let me know what you think. This is a great opportunity for a published doc, right? To write up like, here's what I like about Coda, here's some examples, here's how I see it playing out, and then publishing it. And then you can share it with other folks and they can see your example. Shashir, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you got it. I mean, we have a lot of people in many different countries, and so the first priority for us was in the content page. So, like, let's make it
Mhm.
possible to use all different languages and keyboards and so on. We do well with most of them except for right to left languages. So I think we
Mhm.
still have some work. We still
Yep.
have some work to do for Arabic and Urdu and so on. But I think for many of the other languages we do pretty well. I suspect, and then the next thing was data types, and so we did
Yeah.
different currency formats, we did different date time, so on. The next thing was time zones. So we've kind of been working this list. So
Hmm.
we shipped that
Yep.
earlier this year. Was the ability to use the dock and set a dock level time zone that users can get can get dates relative to them to themselves.
Hmm.
I suspect the next part of it will be what you just said, Maria. Is I think content will be next. I think we'll see the gallery.
Hmm.
Right now, I'd say not everything, but the gallery has a lot of English-based content, and there is a surprising amount of non-English-based content, and I suspect that'll happen fast. And I'd encourage Rue, if
Hmm.
you have great examples, even just translating docs that are already there, or like taking ideas and transforming them
Yeah.
a bit and saying, okay, this is how you can reapply this idea in a slightly different way in this geography. I bet that will get a lot of pull, and I expect to see a lot of that. And then after that, I think is localizing the core product
Hmm.
and getting the main UI and so on to be in multiple languages. And we will definitely get there. It's not the top of our list right now. It's sort of in my list of 3 things. It's not the top of that list yet, but but it's definitely on our minds.
Yeah, excellent. Folks, let us know if you have any other questions you'd like us to answer. Shishir, I have a question. If you think about kind of the rest of the year, we've talked about the things you're really excited about. What do you think is like the primary challenge that we have that we're going to be faced with? What do you think?
My general, I mean, well, so as a company, I think scaling the company
Hmm.
is important, and I think companies growing this fast is very hard to do it and keep your culture in the right place and so on. So
Yeah.
I put a lot of my personal attention on that, and
Hmm.
thankfully, many of the people in the company have experience with that and have worked on larger teams and larger environments, and so I think we've put in place a lot of best practices that I think scale well. So I
Yep.
think that's sort of within the team. I think if I look at the product and community, um, I think I think that I use this phrase a lot. You can make a doc as powerful as an app, and I think then that implies a lot, and in particular, you can think of it as
Hmm.
almost two extremes, right? You want on one side, you want to build a product that is simple as a document. I pick it up and I use it instead of Google Docs
Hmm.
and Word, and so on. And the other side, it's powerful like an app, and I can build anything. I can go rebuild my CRM
Hmm.
system or task management system or inventory system or so on, and I can build anything I want in Coda. And so the constant challenge at Coda is how do you bridge that? And
Hmm.
interestingly, the same feature may end up being used in both ways. Like when we ship
Yeah.
collapsible sections and collapsible regions, there's a group of people that were so excited about, hey, this can be used in all these simple cases. There are also this group of people that said, oh, I can now put multiple charts on a page and just collapse and hide them
Hmm.
in this. It's out, kind of two different extremes of how people were looking at
Yeah.
it. So I think that's our sort of constant. I don't think that'll ever go away as
Hmm.
a when we strike that right balance, I think we get magic.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
Buttons are another favorite example of mine, where
Mm.
the we went through like I don't know countless revisions of what that feature should feel
Yeah.
like, and then I think we finally landed on something that works, and it's
Mhm.
to the person pressing the button, it does exactly what you would expect. You press the button, you get a result,
Mhm.
you get a little notification, you get the you can disable, enable the button, and then on the back end there's a powerful set of building blocks. So you can make these buttons do anything. They can connect to other
Mhm.
systems and connect to other buttons and so on. And so finding that balance between simple and powerful, that's the constant code attention.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yes. So I have one more question, unless other folks have questions as well, which is, 6 years ago when you founded Coda, this whole like no code, low code, revisiting documents was kind of new, right? But now we're seeing it's very much like I can talk about what I do, and like my mom knows what I'm talking about now. Like people have heard of it. So do you want to
Yeah.
comment a little bit on like the interesting shifts we're seeing in software and kind of what the trends and kind of how you feel about it?
Yeah, I have two thoughts on it. So one, I think there's a big difference between the phrase "docs as powerful as apps" and "apps as easy as docs." And I think they sound similar, but they're not the same thing. And then the other
Yes.
one is what I will call the maker generation. And so I'll say a little bit about both. So docs as powerful as apps versus docs as simple as docs. I think both are important, and I think people often ask, do I count Coda as a low code or no code tool. And obviously, like some of our users do, it's okay.
Sure.
You call us what you want. Just call us. The but the from my perspective, I don't think of us that way. I think there are people who
Hmm.
start with that viewpoint and say, I'm going to make coding easier, right? My
Yeah.
view of it is, it comes the other way around, is I think the goal is make it so I can make a doc as powerful as an app so I don't need the app.
Yeah.
And to take like the example I gave earlier of the carpool, like that was previously run in a spreadsheet, and now
Hmm.
it's run in a Coda doc, and it functions like an application, but it doesn't have a lot of the baggage that
Hmm.
applications have, and it doesn't have a deployment cycle, and it doesn't have a compile step, and all these things that you just kind of presume. And
Yeah.
what I'll often hear our users say when this works well is they'll say, "Yeah, I guess it replaced those apps, but it's just a doc," and that gives a sense of
Hmm.
freedom. It gives a sense of opportunity. So I think that's really important in
Yeah.
that spectrum. The maker generation point, I think, is I'll one question I'll get asked fairly often is that going from YouTube to Coda, YouTube seems very different. Like YouTube seems like it's a
Hmm.
big media property and so on. Like how do you go from working on shifting the future of media to the future of docs? And in my mind, it's actually quite linear. Like they and
Hmm.
everybody who works at Coda knows that.
Yeah.
And the in my mind, the thesis behind YouTube was, if I go back 2009, 2008, I joined YouTube. First speech I gave about YouTube was 2009. And I gave this statement that ended up being kind of a rallying cry for YouTube. I said that online video will do to cable what cable did to broadcast. And we're going to go from 3
Hmm.
channels to 300 channels to 3 million channels. And that
Hmm.
was the way I thought about it. The um, At the time when I said that in 2009, I almost got laughed off stage. I mean, we were mostly compared with, you know, uh, people may forget this, but at the time, YouTube was compared with Flickr and MySpace, but both properties that
Right.
people probably don't remember that much. And so comparing YouTube to Disney and ESPN sounded crazy and not quite accurate, actually, right? But now when I
Yeah.
make that statement that online video will do to cable what cable did to broadcast, like that just seems obvious. Like, of course, that's exactly
Mm.
what happened, right? And we're a decade later and it feels obvious. My view is the reason people misunderstood that about YouTube is they underestimated humans. And
Mm.
they presumed that, hey, you can't compete with Disney and ESPN. To be able to be a good video creator, you have to live in LA and you have to go to the USC Film School and you have to work your way up from the
Hmm.
mailroom, and this is
Yeah.
how you do it. And
Yeah.
and they were wrong. And that's an important piece of what made
Hmm.
YouTube possible. Today, when I tell people you can build docs as powerful as apps, and that Coda is going to do to software what YouTube did to video, people will similarly scratch their heads and they'll say,
Hmm.
"I don't. Is that really true? Like, do you really expect that this whole generation of software is going to be built by this set of people that aren't trained as developers and so on?" And what I'll often tell them is, well, A, look at history. This is, I think, underestimating humans is not a good side of not a good side of history to be on. And B, the thing that most people miss is they don't think that they are creating apps. They think they're creating docs. And the
Hmm.
same way, like the YouTubers of those early days, they didn't think they were creating cable channels. They thought they were talking to their friends, and they were so
Yeah.
excited that they had millions of them. and,
Hmm.
and it grew and grew and grew. And I think
Yeah. Oh, Shishir, I think I lost your audio for a second. Oh no. Oh, can you unmute yourself again? You were about to say something brilliant, and then we lost you. Let me try this. Oh no! Let's suspense. Hold on, everybody. Yeah, Shashir, it looks like your mute is still on. Maybe you hit something? I don't know. Mute is stuck. No, we'll never know the brilliance. Yeah, try something else. In the meantime, I will do some really great vamping here. Da, 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 da. Um, so we had a good question here, which is how do we see automation capabilities and rule-based actions growing within Coda over time? So I think this is sort of part of that larger vision, right? Of how do we create these docs that are as powerful as apps, of which automation flows are a big part of it, right? A doc is running a process, an app is running a process for you, a workflow. And so certainly part of our vision for it, probably in the short term, we're really investing in those 3 things that Shashir was sharing before. So it may not be part of our sort of near term, but certainly something that we're thinking about. And I would say, the best thing, the advice I give for all folks is if you have a bright idea or something that would really help you do your job, let us know in the community. I'm going to pop the link over into their community.coda.io. This is the best way to share your feedback, and the more information, the better. Shishir, do you want to try talking again?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
All right.
he has returned. Excellent.
Okay. Well, I have no idea what that was, but this is that seemed to work.
It's just keeping us humble. That's all right.
Yeah. So maybe just to finish the thought a little bit, right? So people will often ask me about, do you really see that same future for Coda? And my view of it is that Coda will do to software what YouTube did to video, and similarly the community that does it won't think that that's what they're doing. And so I think these two thoughts are very important. That making docs as powerful as apps is not the same thing as making apps as easy as docs. And the maker generation, the reason they're going to be so successful, and all the people on this call and so on are going to be so successful, is that people will underestimate them, and they will build docs as powerful as apps, and they'll surprise people, and they'll end up building, in the process of solving the carpool problem for their community, they'll end up building Uber for their community. And that's sort of how I view that playing out.
Yeah. And this is something I always try and reinforce for folks who are new to Coda. People are like, oh, but I'm not a technical person, or I'm not, I just made like a little doc. But really reinforcing for folks like how much, if you build just a little doc that allows you and your family to figure out who's bringing what to the potluck, or you and your friends to stay in touch while distributed, like that, you've built something amazing because it fixes something. And just because the something that it fixes is small doesn't mean that what you've made should be discounted, right? Like cat videos on YouTube, that cat's just sitting there playing with something, but man, that has transformed our culture, right?
Right.
But never underestimating yourself either, right? And even though you think you're just making a doc, knowing that there's something really powerful in just that act of making, even if it is something small.
Right. Exactly.
Excellent. Awesome. Any other final questions for Shishir or myself before we close out today?
That was great. Lots of great questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all of your insights and your connection today. It's always a pleasure when we get to hang out with our makers, because you are the reason why we do all the things that we do. And Shishir, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy, busy schedule to just sit down and chat with us and nerd out on Coda. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Y'all, let us know if there's anything else you need. Join the community at community.coda.io. A great place to get kind of first looks at what's going on, beta testing some of the features that we're trying to try on for size, and also a great place to connect with other brilliant people like you. So with that, we'll go ahead and end our broadcast for today. Thanks so much, Shishir. Enjoy the rest of your week, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye.